Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. And every week, we really look forward to coming together and putting together a show that people hopefully will find both entertaining and informative. But this one's a cut above. We have got a lot to pack into today.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Which means for yet another time, I've got to expeditiously drive my expediter through Congress.gov and get done pretty quick. So, again, we just have to every week look at some of the insanity that the Congress critters are trying to put into the tax code, which actually makes the best argument we can that we need to get rid of all this garbage and replace it with a fair tax.
Yep.
But here we go. The Senate has been fairly busy this past couple of weeks. S 1485 is our first one today. Says a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to include fuel cells using electromechanical processes for the purpose of the energy tax credit.
Oh my word!
Now I thought a fuel cell, took hydrogen or kind of ran on hydrogen.
Yeah.
And
it can be any electrochemical reaction.
Yeah.
All right.
But this is electromechanical processes. So, Mr. Science Teacher, explain that.
Yeah, well, that one's a little above my pay grade, but I know what a fuel cell is.
Yeah.
But fuel cells in the racing business are different than fuel cells in the chemistry lab.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, all I know is fuel cells make electricity and they give off water, and
exactly.
That's it. But
exactly.
In fact, that's where the drinking water in some of the early spacecraft came from, the fuel cells.
Okay.
And people thought, what are they doing?
We need to remind people what we're doing. We're going to Congress.gov, and in the search bar, we put in quotes Internal Revenue Code, and that brings up most of the bills that they have to change the tax code, because they all begin with to change the Internal Revenue Code of 1986.
Code, yes. And if you do that, as of the date we're looking at this, you get 511 hits on that search, which is how many per day?
That averages out to 8.5 proposals each day. Congress is in session to change the tax code. Now, these are proposals. Not all of them will become law, but it demonstrates Congress's insatiable quest to constantly change our tax code and use it to modify citizen behavior. Really is what they're doing.
Yeah, that's crazy. Let's go. And this is another one. I think we've seen something similar to this one before. This is a S 1479 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide a tax credit for taxpayers who remove lead-based hazards. We've seen that before, haven't we not?
Well, that's been around a long time.
Yeah, well, I think,
even when my kids were little, they were talking about removing lead-based paint and stuff.
Well, I've got some lead-based...
And my kids are older than our governor.
Well, I've got some lead-based hazards for anybody who wants to break into my house, but that's a whole different story. We won't go there. But continuing on, we expedite this, and that will be S 1426, is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish, this sounds like fun, a refundable tax credit for parents.
That's it? That's all it says?
That's all it says. Of course, we don't get the text on these because we're looking at ones that were recently introduced, and it takes a while to get the text in there. Of course, again, sometimes the text is thousands of pages long. We couldn't begin to go through it all. But this is to...
but they want to give a tax credit. In other words, they want to give away taxpayer money to people who are parents.
Yes.
That covers a lot of Americans.
Yeah, that does. Now, does that mean parents who have children in the home? My wife and I are parents. Our child is grown and doesn't live with us anymore. That's the same case for you and your wife.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're still parents.
Yeah.
Even though we're not actively parenting someone.
Now,
anyway,
since our grandson has come to stay with us because he got tired of the state he was living in, and he's moved to Florida looking for a job, does that re-qualify us for that?
You'll have to ask Senator Hawley. That's his bill. Okay. One more this time around, because we got to expedite this. And this is S 1424, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to permit high-deductible health plans to provide chronic disease prevention services to plan enrollees prior to satisfying their plan deductibles. In other words, the tax code is being changed so the government can tell you what you can and can't spend your money on.
Yeah, they want to use the tax code to modify health coverage. They want to use the tax code to modify the use of fuel cells. All right, they want to use the tax code to give away money to parents. That's rather broad.
Okay. Well,
it
I
just
tell you
doesn't
what,
make any sense. And
we'll dig into some more of these next week on FAIRtax Power Radio, but right now we have got to move on. Look, you got something real quick we need to drop in, a comment relative to last week's Wally's World.
yeah, and we get rather common comments. Frequently, we get comments from Carlos, and he said, "This guy really is really good. Now, if people will just listening." I'm watching for the second time because I was busy the first time sending this to everybody on my email list, encouraging all other people to watch the video and do the same. Get her done.
Yeah, this was our quarterly visit with Jade Wally, and he was talking about what America's psychological responses would be to the FAIRtax, which is pretty good. That is of course archived on the FAIRtax official page on Facebook. You can go back and look at it. It's a bit longer than our normal episode, but
it is because Jade tackles a subject and he goes into it deeply. He truly understands not only the FAIRtax, but in this case, the American psyche. And and not only on YouTube and Facebook, but Rumble. And also, I take a version of it and put it on the Florida FAIRtax YouTube page under the playlist for webinars. All right.
I was kind of ribbing him a little bit about the acquisition of his new psychological degree on top of his CPA credentials. But that works pretty cool. Now we got to get into the really good stuff.
Yeah.
We have not. It's so early in the election cycle. Of course, the election is well over about a year and a half away.
Yeah.
But we have got our first FAIRtax candidate pledge, and we didn't really solicit it. It was sent to us.
Yep.
It's a lady in Wyoming. Her name is Marissa Selvig, and we've got her picture with her pledge here somewhere. But Marissa is one of several challengers who are trying to unseat Liz Cheney, who has ruffled a lot of feathers recently, and that's not something we're going to get into. But Marissa is one of, I think, 5 challengers that it's primarying against Liz Cheney.
But she serves to distinguish herself from the others because
she wants to support, has signed the FAIRtax Pledge. I don't know what any of the other challengers have done. We'll certainly offer them the opportunity to do so, encourage them to do so. But something else Marissa's done really cool. This is about a 30-second video that she made with her kid, or one of her kids. So let's roll this.
That's good.
Hi, I'm Marissa Selvig, and I am running for Congress here in the great state of Wyoming. And I just signed the FAIRtax Pledge because I want to work hard to get that passed. And do you know why? This is one of my children. She is 13. And what would you like to do when you get a job someday?
Keep my money.
That's right, keep her money. So let's get it passed. Be blessed and stay free.
All right, that is cool. The FAIRtax, simple enough for a 13-year-old to understand that with the FAIRtax, you get to keep your money. Oh, thanks, Marissa. That's really cool.
That was good.
And hopefully, we've had the idea thrown out to us, and maybe we can follow through on this, that we can do some quick Zoom interviews with all of the candidates who have signed the FAIRtax Pledge.
As long as we talk about the FAIRtax, and it's not a campaign stump speech for them.
We don't use our platform for campaigning, but we can talk to each candidate about what what attracted them to the FAIRtax and things like that. We can keep it on the FAIRtax. We'll keep it short, and of course we'll maybe do one per show as we can arrange our schedules with people who want to do that. And hopefully Marissa can be the first person we talk to.
Well, that makes sense because she is the winner of the FAIRtax Candidates Pledge lottery. She was the first one to sign up in the entire country.
Yes.
So
indeed.
We're very happy about that.
So let's point out that on fairtax.org, under I think it's under Get Involved, there's you can open that menu, and one of the items under that menu is FAIRtax Candidate Pledge. You can print out a hard copy of that pledge and take it. Hopefully candidates will be having town halls again by the time the election cycle really heats up good. And ask your candidates to sign it. If you can get video, if you can get still pictures, or both, either one, of your candidates signing the FAIRtax Pledge, send it in to us, FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com, and we'll feature them here on FAIRtax Power Radio. As a matter of fact, as the election cycle goes along, we didn't do this last time, we probably ought to this time, it's just every every so often go down the whole list, remind people, and give the candidates that have signed the FAIRtax Pledge, a little bit of publicity. We can't endorse here, but we can educate on people who have.
We can recognize, we can recognize those people who are supporting, and we should recognize the people who are supporting the FAIRtax. Yep, absolutely.
We certainly should, and so Marissa, we do wish you well, and we'll see how that goes. Of course, we wish every FAIRtax candidate well, and but this is kind of what we've been knowing about this for a while. We were not at liberty to say anything about it ahead of time, but the FAIRtax guys, Ron and I, have just gotten back from a special candidate symposium. It was kind of like a boot camp, with all the dissatisfaction with the current political scene. It's no wonder that there are a lot of people out there who want to run and displace a sitting member of Congress.
Yeah,
but that's not an easy thing to do. There's an FEC regulations, all kinds of reporting requirements, so lots of hoops that you've got to jump through in order just to be a candidate. So some folks who shall remain nameless and anonymous organized this symposium for candidates. It's kind of like a candidate boot camp.
Yep.
To give different candidates the knowledge, the basic knowledge they need on how to run a winning campaign, winning strategy, plus stuff as mundane as just filing the reports that are required that you might not know too much about. And actually, it was Laura McHugh, the state director in North Carolina, who was originally invited to come out to this symposium and present the FAIRtax to these folks.
Yep.
And she called us and said, "Would y'all like to join us in this trip?" So it was it was a long way away from Florida, I'll tell you that, but it was well worth it to talk. First time we've ever gotten to talk specifically to candidates about the FAIRtax.
How often do we get an opportunity to have like a captive audience of future candidates for office, all right, where we can sit down and talk to them? And Bob made a great PowerPoint, a wonderful PowerPoint, directed at candidates, not the general public. He did a good job in modifying the presentation to make it worthwhile to candidates. And so this whole effort, I thought, was very good, because like Bob said, one thing that they convinced me of with all the presenters there, the different aspects of running for office, I never want to run for office.
No, I don't either. I'm too old
There's
for that.
a lot to it. There's a lot to it. And these people have their work cut out for them. And they asked us to come and talk about taxation.
Yeah, and the one message that I really wanted to get across to these folks was the FAIRtax has been a bill in Congress. It was first introduced in 1999, over 20 years ago. It's been up there, say, for over 20 years. During those 20 years, there were times when the Republicans were in the majority. There were times when the Democrats were in the majority, and nobody from either side wanted to do anything with it. So the FAIRtax is clearly something that the swamp creatures on both sides of the aisle want absolutely nothing to do with, which means it is a fantastic opportunity for those who want to replace those swamp creatures to differentiate themselves from the crowd, latch onto this thing, take it out to the voters and say, look what the swamp has been denying you for 20 years. Yeah. So we were really well. The attendance wasn't quite what we thought it might be, but it was still, reasonably good.
Yeah, not bad. So, and like I said, how often do we have the opportunity to meet with a lot of candidates, future candidates for office? So I thought it was great. It was great, and it was well received. They really liked. We did our standard introduction, with the scrolling banner. Introduced ourselves as the FAIRtax Guys. We got some applause. But like I said, Bob's presentation, which I think we're going to talk about next week, aren't we?
Maybe a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, it was good, and we ended up.
I say the bottom line from that, we were talking about Marissa being the first person to sign the FAIRtax Candidate Pledge for this next election cycle. After our presentation, there were kind of some rules. We couldn't do a lot of electioneering in the actual room that the conference took place in, but anything goes out in the hall. So afterwards, when we were out there in the hall, we were, constantly being engaged by some of these candidates wanting to know more about the FAIRtax. Some of them had heard about it before, didn't know much about it. Some of them had never heard of it before, had no clue what it was. Yeah. And we got several of the candidates from there at the conference to sign the FAIRtax Candidate Pledge. And at the top of the list was a young man that we met at CPAC. We talked about him when we came back from CPAC in February. Yeah. And he's right here in Florida.
Yeah, he is. And as Bob said, we met Reuben Young very briefly at CPAC. He introduced himself and said that he's running in Florida here, District 23. He wants to unseat Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And he didn't know, at the time in CPAC in February, he had no idea what the fair tax was. And we gave him the elevator speech. We answered a few questions and so forth. And it was interesting to me that after our presentation and your PowerPoint, he said it finally clicked.
Yeah,
and he was absolutely on board.
He came up to me in the hall after the presentation and said, "You guys seal the deal today. I'm a fair tax man all the way."
Yep.
You should have seen the reaction of the event organizer when he found out that Reuben was trying to unseat Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He said, "Please." So we're not going to get too political on that, but that was something that hopefully will help him do that. And of course, we've got a picture of him there signing, or not signing, or just with his pledge.
Yep.
But Reuben Young, Florida District 23. There was actually another one from Florida as well. Willie Montague. He is running in Florida District 10. Of course, you've got pictures of all these. We get a picture
Yes,
of Willie
I do.
with his pledge.
Yep.
We'll put that up there. And the interesting thing about Willie Montague, I thought, was that he knows the young lady that was in Paul Wazakowski's videos.
Yes, the lunch and taxes videos.
We used the lunch and taxes videos as part of our presentation there to this group of candidates. And he came up to us afterwards and says, "I know her. Her name's Ashley, I think Clayton, Ashley something like that. I think she lives in Oklahoma now. But those videos are 12 years old, believe it or not.
Yeah,
But they are still the best illustration I've ever seen of just how absurd the income tax is when it's compared side by side with a fair tax.
Yeah, and one of the reasons those videos are so good, the content is good, but each of the actors plays his or her part perfectly.
Yeah, Ashley nailed it. And some of the other guys
expression
did.
on her face, when the income tax guy was bragging about his income tax, and yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Be careful.
Rolling the eyes.
Be careful. Don't make any mistakes. If we find mistakes, we can fine you. We can put you in jail. And so
yeah. So they might want to be aware of that.
Be aware of that. And she rolled her eye. Yeah.
So
right.
all three of them, but her expressions, her very subtle expressions, were just precious.
Yeah. So Willie Montague, Florida 10, another one of our Fair Tax Campaign Pledge signers.
Yeah.
And of course, there's Reuben. They're going through the pile here. Got Gerard Sessler. This is we got this from all over the country now. He is in Washington State. I mean, way over on the other side of the country here from Florida. Washington Congressional District 4. And Gerard, Jerrod Sessler.
Or it could be Jared.
Or Jared could be. Oh,
Yeah.
It's Jared. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's Jared. Anyways, he was interested. I didn't get a chance to talk to him very much. Had he heard of the fair tax before?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
He was not well versed in it. I know that.
Yeah.
But when he heard what we had to say about it, he says, "I'm on board."
Yep. So that's good.
So,
and
Jared, sorry I got you wrong earlier.
Yeah.
But,
So that's good. That's good.
That's Washington Congressional District 4. And one more from there, Alex Stovall. He is from Arizona.
Yep.
District 7.
Mm-hmm.
So he is a fair tax candidate pledge. So without even, of course, we weren't allowed to solicit for these things. These people came up to us.
That's right.
And voluntarily said that they wanted to, what could we do? And at that point, outside the hall, we could say, well, we got this pledge you could sign. We could not solicit for these signatures in the actual conference hall. But these 4 people came up to us afterwards and wanted to know, hey, what can we do?
Yep.
So hopefully we'll be going through this.
Alex looks like a young man, but I looked on his Facebook page. He's been around. He's an accomplished person and so forth. Mm-hmm. Some of these folks are much younger than they look younger than they are, but he's an experienced person. So
Alex and Jared and Reuben and Willie. from the conference we just came back from. And hopefully there's supposed to be another couple of these things in different parts of the country, though. We don't have dates and exact locations yet, or actually we don't even have an official invitation to go any of the other ones yet. But we do anticipate being able to go to these conferences a bit later in the year and again talk to candidates about the FAIRtax. Now, that if you can sell someone who's running for Congress on the FAIRtax and get them to run on it. I mean, a lot of times you'll hear that, I'm for it, but then they'll move off to other issues and stuff like that. A lot of them are afraid of being attacked. Because if the FAIRtax has one flaw, it's that it's easily demagogued. We have heard the attack ads here in Florida. So my opponent wants to add this huge tax to the cost of everything you buy and make your life so expensive you can't afford to live anymore. And of course, they just kind of conveniently forget to mention that this huge tax that the guy supports replaces a bunch of other huge taxes that they're already paying, and it makes their life easier. It gets rid of the IRS. It gets rid of tax returns, puts more money in your pocket by getting rid of withholding and getting the prebate, the tax refund every month. Those just kind of don't get mentioned in those dishonest ads, so we've got to prepare them for stuff like that.
And it's incumbent on the FAIRtax supporter, the FAIRtax candidate, to strongly defend their position, because, as Bob has said before, you have to make the other guy defend his or her position on supporting the income tax and the IRS.
Yeah, that's one of the points I really wanted to make to these guys. If you run on the FAIRtax, you can define your opponent as a friend of the income tax, and I think I used the phrase card-carrying member of the IRS fan club. How many people are going to vote for somebody like that?
You can nail them.
When you've got the choice to vote for somebody who wants to get rid of the IRS or vote for somebody who wants to keep it.
And experience shows us that a candidate who strongly supports the FAIRtax and strongly defends their position, generally they do very well in the election. In the Florida governor's primary a couple of years ago, we saw a real good example of that.
The guy that was leading by a pretty good margin came out, ran negative ads against Governor DeSantis, or he wasn't governor at that time, of course, but Ron DeSantis was a FAIRtax supporter, and one of his primary opponents kind of tried to use that against him, and it backfired.
And it did not go well for that young man. He ended up, yes, Mr. DeSantis did get the endorsement from President Trump, but still, FAIRtax is a strong issue, and his opponent went from being 20 points ahead to losing by almost 20 points in that primary.
You remember what Rick Scott, when you were talking to Rick Scott, what Rick Scott said when you told him?
Oh yeah, I mentioned that.
When Adam Putnam was his name, he had gone, and Rick Scott.
He was still governor of Florida, but he was at the end of his term. He was term limited, and he was running for senator against Bill Nelson, and I had the chance to talk to him here in Ocala, and I said, if Bill Nelson goes, I know you're a supporter of the FAIRtax, and if your opponent comes out and tries to demagogue the FAIRtax, I said he'll probably get the same treatment that Adam Putnam got. And the governor looked at me and said, "Did Adam come out against the FAIRtax?" I said, "Yeah," and I described the video that he made and he looked at me and said, "Well, why did he do that?"
What did he do that for? That's a dumb thing to do.
So he was surprised. Governor, now Senator Scott is a supporter of the FAIRtax, but we need a bill in the Senate. We don't have a bill in the Senate yet, and I think he would be a good one to be the primary sponsor.
Yeah, we'll work on him. We'll get our friends in Tennessee to work on Marsha Blackburn. Of course, you got to mention this real quick, that the current sponsor in the House, the congressman from Georgia, he just wrote a piece in the Washington Examiner. You've got that in there somewhere.
Yeah, I've got
that on your computer. Yeah, this is Buddy Carter, Representative Carter, who took over as the primary sponsor of H.R. 25.
This is in the Washington Examiner. I'm looking at their website. The FAIRtax is the solution to the Democrats' attack on paychecks. And he goes on, he says, as people file their taxes this season, they should be aware that the numbers may look different next year, and not in a good way. That's because as the nation recovers from a pandemic in which many have lost their jobs, the Democrats want to raise taxes. And he goes on to talk about this, about how, yeah, it's going to show up in the paycheck, it's going to show up in your W-2s and so forth, and it's not going to be pretty. And even though the president insists that nobody below $400,000 is going to be taxed, that's almost impossible.
Their taxes may not go up,
Yeah.
but I guarantee you that the embedded costs of all these new taxes are going to get passed down to everybody, no matter how much you're making.
Yep.
So yeah, even if your individual tax bill doesn't get raised, and I'm not sure he can do that. I mean, they promised that before, a real high ceiling, and the actual product came out to hit people a lot lower.
Yeah.
But even if your tax bill doesn't get raised, you're going to get socked with higher prices, as the current trend is to try to sock corporations with higher taxes. And if you do that, they just pass those costs on to everybody who buys their products and services.
Yeah. This article came out April 29th. Like I said, Washington Examiner. It's an op-ed by Buddy Carter. Look it up. It's a good article.
Okay, well, we got about 2.5 minutes left to do our call to action real quick.
Here's our call to action sheet. Whoop, the fan is blowing away. Okay. Obviously, we have a national group, Americans for Fair Taxation, and their website is fairtax.org. We encourage you to go to fairtax.org. They've modified the website a little bit, so now the option to get updates, you'll see it right at the bottom of the first page there. All right.
You got to scroll down to get to it.
Scroll down a little bit, fill it out. You won't get spam when you give them your information, but you will get some wonderful emails. Steve Hayes' chairman's report is always it's a weekly report. He takes a subject and goes into it deeply. Jim Bennett's Grassroots Corners, all right, that's a good. What has he been doing lately?
Actually, he is featuring Paul Livingston's. Remember the series they did on sticky ideas?
Yeah.
Paul Livingston, the state director here in Florida, has put together a group that's trying to explore sticky ideas.
Yep.
So he's going to talk about us and our trip here before too much longer.
Yeah. So, and then there's a short email, on Tuesday that reminds you about the FAIRtax show that streams live to Facebook at 8 o'clock. So, anyway, what?
What was that?
little noise in the studio here. Stuff is falling down.
Oh, well,
right?
As long as it doesn't fall on our head, we're good.
Yeah.
We have not mentioned PopVox in a while. POPVOX. That is a place where you can go and register your opinion on any piece of legislation that's before Congress. We urge folks to go out there and express their support for H.R. 25. The percentage of people that support H.R. 25 is off the charts, but the actual numbers aren't what they need to be.
Right. We need more numbers going on to PopVox and showing their support for H.R. 25, because that's what Congress critters look at. They look at that site.
Yeah, so. And I'm going to keep pounding on this every FAIRtax Power Radio until next February or whenever it is. We want 500 FAIRtax volunteers to come to CPAC next time. We have got to be more visible than we were this last time.
Yep.
So,
that will do it.
That'll do it. So, and that's again, we don't know if it's going to be back in the D.C. area like it usually is, or back in Florida again.
Wherever it is, we'll be there.
You've got a year to prepare yourself to get back to CPAC, and that's going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton,
and I'm Ron Malero.
The FAIRtax Guys reminding you that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it. Follow the FAIRtax Guys on social media and their own website, fairtaxguys.com, and check back every week for a new episode of FAIRtax Power Radio.